best coverage of the Jazz, Utes, and Cougars is right here on The Zone. This is JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, everybody, welcome back. JJ and Alex, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. We are here at Mountain America Expo Center here in Sandy, and it is the Boat Show and Water Sports Expo. Go enjoy, or come down and enjoy it. Bring everybody along. There's a lot of boats, but that's not all they do. It's not just a one-trick pony here. Tons of boats. Tons of anything that has to do with the water, but also anything even close to adjacent to the water sports industry. You got yourself right here under one roof, so it's awesome. Joining us on the program right now, Travis Yost, TSN. He's been with us on this program before. Never after a historic meltdown that what happened last night in Carolina for the Utah Mammoth, because it doesn't really happen very often. First time in the salary cap era that a team was able to come back from a multi-goal from being behind by multiple goals, and then they ended up losing this thing. It was 4-2. We were all patting each other on the back in our text group that are all watching these games, and just like that, it was 5-4 in a historic meltdown and a weird end to a really, really good road trip for this team. Travis, that was wild, man. Those last 3 minutes were phenomenal, but also really bad if you're a Mammoth fan.
Yeah, no kidding. By the way, I just drove past you guys. I'm like, you're a good time to sell boats. It's like 90 degrees outside in Utah right now. Holy cow. I'm like sweating. I'm sweating driving back. But, I'll say, right, games like that, for how good the Mammoths have been playing the last 2 months, boy, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of the beauty of stringing together so many wins in a row is you kind of reset your performance expectations for a team. But, a couple things, right? Obvious meltdown, right? And I think the Utah coaching staff and players talked about, trying to own it and being accountable for what was a late game meltdown. But, you're also talking about tail end of a road trip against one of the premier teams in the league, one of the very few teams, by the way, who actually has outplayed Utah on the year. I think Utah's in the top 6 now in goal differential in the league. One of those teams ahead of them are the Carolina Hurricanes, bona fide Stanley Cup contenders. So very tough loss, but you hope it's an isolated issue and that this team can regroup because, this side of the Buffalo Sabres, they're one of the hottest teams in the league right now.
Yeah, Travis, the truth is we didn't expect them to win that game, and so the result was not shocking, but the way it happened was we'll see how they deal with it. But the bottom line is this Utah Mammoth team is playing excellent hockey. Even in that game, for the minus the last 3 minutes, they were phenomenal on that last game of a road trip. What level of hockey – you're watching all these teams, so we're really lasered in on the Mammoth, but just how high of a level of hockey are the Utah Mammoth playing right now during this hot stretch in the month of January?
Do you want a stat or an argument? I got two.
Both.
I got one of each for you.
Give
Which one do you want? You want the stat? Okay.
Yeah, let's do the stat, and then we'll argue afterward about it. Yeah.
Which teams in the league have a more prolific offense than the Mammoth year to date?
It's probably got to be maybe the Avalanche, and
that's it.
That's it
right there. That is
Okay.
it. The Colorado Avalanche. Utah is now currently the number 2 offensive team.
Wow.
Certainly 5-on-5 in the league. And by the way, I think that's underpinning a lot of what you're seeing in terms of standing success and why they've aggressively moved up in an otherwise very tough, at least top half of the division. So yeah, offense is carrying the day for the Mammoth, especially 5-on-5. There's no doubt about that. The other piece, though, and the argument is this, which I think – and by the way, I promise is sheer coincidence. So, I try and set my articles. I file twice a week, and I typically cover, I would say 90% of it is Canadian teams or adjacent to Canadian team news, trade deadline stuff, et cetera. This Monday coming up, these Canadians from land to land, from across the country, they're going to read about the Buffalo Sabres and Utah Mammoth because the two franchises with probably the two most checkered, last 2-decade history between the Coyotes debacle and, the Sabres 14-year playoff drought. I mean, these were, 3 steps below what I would consider an afterthought franchise. And yeah, moving to Salt Lake City, Hope Springs Eternal, new franchise, second year, blah, blah, blah. But these are two teams that no one really ever has thought of or spared a waking moment thinking about when it comes to the playoff discussion. And yet Buffalo and Utah are two of the hottest teams in the league. They're both inside the top 6 in goal differential on the league, which is by far the biggest predictor of what is to come over the next 30 some odd games. And like I said, Utah and the Sabres, the connective tissue, and I don't want to talk too much about Buffalo, but I think the connective tissue is this. If you don't have a McDavid or McKinnon, and by the way, there's 3 teams in the league that have this supernova at the top of the lineup, this all-time eraser, and you don't have, the all-time outperforming goalie like a Connor Hellebuck in Winnipeg or an Ilya Sorokin in the island on the island, you need a team that is built off of depth competency, a team that's able to row 3 lines at least and 2 to 3 defensive pairings that are going to outplay the opposition whenever they're on the ice. You cannot have weak spots around the lineup. And that's one of the beauties of the NHL's hard cap league is, if you want to invest aggressively at the top of the lineup, you've got to fill in the rest of the roster with either big hits through the draft and development, or you've got to find real diamonds in the rough. Utah, obviously, by the work previously with the Coyotes, a lot of these prospects have now matured into NHL-ready or, at this point, veterans in the case of guys like Clayton Keller. And they look like one of the most cohesive teams in the league. Frankly, if you look from December 1st on, Utah looks simply like one of the best teams in the NHL, and it almost makes you want to throw up after you watch a Carolina Hurricanes game last night, where it's it was right in front of us. But there are so few holes on this Utah team in a good way that it more than offsets any concerns you might have about what does the top end of this team look like. The special teams is average. The penalty kills 15th in the league. Okay, but 5-on-5, especially notable in the playoffs when whistles can disappear in a blink, they are one of the best 5-on-5 teams in the league. It's because they have very few weaknesses across the lineup, and keep your fingers crossed on injury health and things of that nature that you can't control. This Utah team not just looks playoff caliber, but you start wondering if they can maybe chase down a Minnesota and actually secure one of those top 3 spots in the Central rather going into the wild card. The one thing about the Mammoth is, I think making the playoffs would be an all-time, it'd be a fantastic year 2 development. I think we even talked about that early in the year is that should be the goal, qualifying for the playoffs. They're talented enough. They're ready for it. You don't want to play Colorado or Vegas in the first round. You just don't. I mean, you don't want to be in that business. Not that the other options are that much better, but, if you're Utah and if you're a Mammoth fan, you're getting excited about this team, the last thing you want to see is a 7-game series with the Avalanche in the playoffs.
We have to note that they've done this run in January without Logan Cooley.
Yeah, and then Dylan Gunther for the last couple games too. That's why I was last night was so awesome. I think for a lot of people watching it, they go, these wins that they're getting without these guys, their third line. I mean, when Kyler Yamamoto's putting in 2 goals and an assist,
Michael Carcone and Kyler Yamamoto are playing like all-stars.
Yeah, and against that team, it was really interesting to watch. You bring up a phenomenal point because it was they were already dealing with some of this stuff because we got to see last year's version of this team that didn't have the depth and didn't play like a team very often.
No doubt about that. And I think the name you brought up, that is I think indicative of things are going relatively well for this organization right now. Say what you will about Kyler Yamamoto. I mean, he's a fourth-liner journeyman type who's good enough to be in the league, but he bounces around. He's been in the AHL quite a bit. And he's the guy that you typically are plugging into the lineup as your 12th or 13th forward, or you're calling him up from the AHL and just hoping that you don't get killed when he's on the ice. The Mammoth are outscoring teams 5-on-5, 20-12 with Yamamoto on the ice. And by the way, Carcone is very similar. They're +6 there too. And that goes to my point, right? When your third line is routinely outperforming the middle 6 of other teams around the league, it takes so much pressure off of your top line and your top pairing where you're expected to dominate and control games. And by the way, they have. And so one of the things about the Cooley injury that I think is notable, one player who I think has really stepped up his game is Clayton Keller. And that's exactly what you expect from a veteran player who's kind of been through the rigor, so to speak. Frankly, I think, and by the way, we shouldn't have this conversation without saying, the Mammoth are getting I don't think he's the winner, but Vezina Trophy finalist, Karol Vejmelka. I don't think that's I think that's on the board for sure. And so they're getting insane goaltending, average special teams, a very good 5-on-5 team. And I want to underline one very specific thing. This is a team with $14 million, in excess of $14 million in cap space going into the trade deadline next month. You're already hearing names like Artemi Panarin. I know Sportsnet are broadcasting peer in Canada. I know a couple of reporters have already linked Utah to Panarin, which makes sense because they've got both the cap flexibility and a lot of younger players that teams like the Rangers would covet. But I don't think I think Utah has a real chance to be a big buyer at this trade deadline, further supplement this lineup. And I think the real question is, like, where do you improve it? I think there's opportunity to maybe tinker across the bottom six forward group a little bit and upgrading there. But this is a very well-rounded team. And if I'm a Mammoth fan, like, no hype. Like, this is one of the hottest teams in the league. If you haven't been out to a game, and now is your opportunity. I think the only negative news, frankly, guys, you got a 20-day Olympic break coming. That's like icing this hot streak in an emphatic way.
You're right. You don't want this team to stop playing while they're hot, but they will give them a chance to get healthy and heal up, especially with Cooley and Gunther. We don't know if we're going to see Gunther before the break or not, but they'll definitely be back after that break. How interesting is that trade deadline going to be? How active do you think teams in the league are? What are some? You mentioned Panarin. What are some other names out there that could be moved around that trade deadline that you're hearing?
I certainly think Panarin's near the top of the list. One of the reasons why Panarin is so interesting for people who aren't necessarily aware of kind of what's going on in New York, Panarin's one of the better players in the league, 34 years old. He's still a point-per-game player. I mean, he's absolutely fantastic. But one of the reasons that it's become so notable, I would say, is the Rangers came out and basically, I mean, not even basically, they literally said, we are going to be selling, please call us, this is a massive rebuild. I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but they couldn't have been more clear about what they are potentially putting on the table. I think for other names, if you're the Mammoth, and by the way, like, this is not a light expectation. I expect the Mammoth to be significant buyers at the deadline. They have both the bullets you need, a ridiculous amount of cap space, and the prospects or young players or assets that other teams would covet. Outside of Panarin, who obviously has a colossal contract, I think there's other names within the Rangers lineup that could be interesting. Vinny Trocheck could be an interesting middle six upgrade if you're Utah. Slide him right into that lineup. I also think two teams that have had horrific years in the Western Conference. Mammoth have played them a couple times. St. Louis Blues and the Vancouver Canucks. I think Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou are two names to watch. Again, forwards from the Blues organizations. Robbie Fabry as well. He's a pending UFA. These are all, I would say, middle six forwards, if that's where Utah was looking to upgrade, especially assuming Gunther and Cooley get back to full health. And then the Vancouver Canucks are another team to watch. The name there that intrigues me, you'll hear a lot about Evander Kane just because he's been around the league for so many years and he's kind of bounced around. I think the interesting name there is Elias Pettersson, who looked like one of the most promising players in the entire league the first couple of seasons in Vancouver. I mean, truly, he was in that, one-of-one type category. And his career has really flatlined over the last couple of years. He's also got a pretty sizable contract. And I think a lot of teams may be reticent to pay, 90 cents on the dollar for a player who already looks like he's declining at a relatively young age. But I have seen this story enough where I think a two-sided coin is always worth considering here, which is as the talent around any player outside of McDavid and Draisaitl erodes, production can erode as well. And I would be fascinated to see what a player like Pettersson could do in a much more talented and deeper lineup that the Mammoth currently have. Vancouver's not in the division, so that also offers up another interesting opportunity as a trade partner. But all this to say, I would be stunned. Stunned would be an understatement if the Mammoth did not upgrade this lineup at the trade deadline. I think they are on my extremely short list of teams that I expect to be buyers in the next month.
Well, listen, Bill Armstrong knows what he's doing. He's a great GM, and I think that he's a guy who, if he sees something, he'll make a move. And they set it all up to be able to make these types of moves right now. And so I think that they look, the second half of the season, which we kind of obviously it's less than a half a season left, but that Olympic break, of course, is kind of breaking the season up for us. But looking forward to it, see what the Mammoth can do, not just at the trade deadline, but if they can keep hot. Certainly they have a couple games left at home before they get into the break, but looking forward to this one. And, Travis, we're going to keep you on the short list of calls so we can get ready for this playoffs. We're still getting used to this, man. Like, you got to walk us through every step of this thing, man, so we appreciate it.
Amen. I got a 10-second question for you guys.
Yes,
now that you've seen how good this team is qualifying for the playoffs the bar to the clear, or do you want to see them win around?
No, we were all the same boat.
The expectations are going up.
The expectations was, hey, snag a wild card spot. That's what everybody has said this year. Like, that's what everybody said. But when you start to when you put together the month that they had, which was the best month of January that this franchise has ever had in its history, then you start talking, all right, maybe they can run down that third-place team in their division.
11 points out.
But, I mean, it's
a big climb.
It is, but they're in such a better spot last year. At this point last year, because we talked about this, Travis, too, and I'm going long on this, but they were at 43 points through 41 games last year, and that's where they were this year. They got into this stretch, and they have cleared by far what they were doing at this point last year because they had a not very good January and going into February last year. And so that's the difference. They made some moves, and they actually have gotten to be such a better team in that time frame. So looking forward to it.
Thought. I'll leave you with this little statistical nugget. They are on pace. So if they hold their pace through 82 games, this will be the best single season this franchise had going back to 1996. Best single season they have ever had from an 82 game profile. So awesome. that is what we're looking at. That's what's on the board right now.
There you go. Travis, we appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you again.
Take care.
There you go.